conduct operations to get these dangerous criminals off of our streets that are perpetuating violence, and continue to go forward and deliver FEMA funding and help these states that have been so hit hard in these storms recently, and run TSA and keep our airlines and air traffic control safe. All of those are jobs of the Department of Homeland Security that we need to continue to push on, even though we have these violent monsters that are attacking law enforcement every day, continuing to use their tactics. We will.
This is a prosecutorial analysis of the systemic and documented deceptions presented by the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration regarding federal immigration enforcement. For months, the American public has been told that Immigration and Customs Enforcement is conducting a surgical operation against the most dangerous criminals in the country. We have been told that those being arrested are murderers and rapists. We have been told that the streets are safer because the worst of the worst are being removed. Here, play this clip.
We have secured the border. We've driven down the murder rates and the crime rates to historic lows in this country, saved hundreds of millions of lives by interdicting drugs across the country and in our maritime borders. We've seen the left violently react, perpetuate violence and mob rule in our cities in retaliation for President Trump enforcing the law. And we're going to continue on a tactical plan to confront this violence that they're bringing, to make sure we still continue to do the right.
These are the claims used to justify the use of lethal force in American cities and the deployment of thousands of federal agents. But the data tells a different story. The records of the agency itself tell a different story. When you look at the evidence, the gap between the rhetoric and the reality is not a matter of interpretation. It is a matter of fact. Today, we will examine the evidence, the law, and the lack of accountability that has led to this moment. The claim that the Trump administration is exclusively or even primarily targeting violent criminals for immigration enforcement is a lie. It is a lie told to the American people from the White House briefing room. It is a lie told by the Secretary of Homeland Security on national television. It is a lie maintained despite the administration's own internal data proving the opposite. The administration insists it is going after the worst of the worst, but the records show they are rounding up thousands of people who have no criminal record in the United States. They are using the word criminal to describe people who have never been convicted of a crime. They are using the word terrorist to describe intensive care nurses. Here, play this clip.
That we're stopping terrorists and criminals from harming the American people. I always tell people that the days that you don't hear about us are the days that we were successful, because that meant that we stopped so many dangerous people from perpetuating violence and have gotten those terrorist threats and criminals out of our country before they had the chance to do something that would have devastated families.
These are not mere exaggerations or political spin. These are documented falsehoods used to mask a policy of indiscriminate mass arrest. We must define the lie by the exact words of those in power. In July, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem stated in a press conference that the administration has specifically targeted the worst of the worst. She defined these individuals as violent criminals and those who are breaking our laws. On January 18, 2026, Secretary Noem appeared on CBS's Face the Nation and stated that 70% of those arrested have committed or have charges against them for violent crimes. White House border czar Tom Homan echoed this on NBC's Meet the Press, claiming that between 60 and 70% of people arrested are criminals. Here, play this clip.
Do you want to talk a little bit about these crime rates and what your department and your leadership has done specifically towards that?
Well, the statistics speak for themselves. With crime rate at historical lows, it's at the lowest rate across this country since it started to be tracked over 125 years ago. Murders have dramatically dropped. We've got drug trafficking down, fentanyl coming over the southern borders down by almost 60%.
President Donald Trump has repeated these claims on Truth Social, asserting that enforcement is targeted at tens of millions of illegal alien criminals, including hundreds of thousands of convicted murderers and rapists. These are the authorities. These are the claims. These are the definitions of the lie. The forensic evidence from the sources proves these claims are false. An analysis of ICE arrest data obtained by the Deportation Data Project shows that the percentage of people arrested with no criminal convictions or pending charges has doubled over time. In the first 3 months of the Trump administration, 21.9% of those arrested had no criminal record. By the 3 months ending in mid-October, that number rose to 40.5%. By January, nearly 43% of those detained had no convictions or charges. This is the agency's own data. It shows a steady and dramatic increase in the arrest of non-criminals. While the administration claims it is focusing on the most dangerous individuals, the percentage of those arrested with actual criminal convictions fell from 44.7% in the first 3 months to 31.8% by mid-October. In January 2026, the percentage of detainees with criminal convictions was roughly 29%. This is a complete inversion of the administration's public narrative. Here, play this clip.
About what we do for work in this country to bring people that are dangerous criminals to justice and then remove them from our country if they don't belong here, if they came here illegally. We have the opportunity every day for people who want to go home and are in this country illegally. We give you $2,600. We buy you a plane ticket and send you home right now. That's a voluntary program. We've had millions of people take advantage of.
The evidence further reveals that violent criminals represent only a tiny fraction of total arrests. David Beer, the director of immigration studies at the Cato Institute, analyzed non-public ICE data. He found that among those with criminal convictions detained by ICE, only 8% were for violent or property crimes. Only about 5% were for violent criminal convictions. This includes minor offenses like bar altercations, not the murderers and rapists cited by the president. A New York Times analysis found that nationwide, only 7% of those arrested in ICE operations had any past violent conviction. In target cities like Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, the majority of people swept up by ICE had no criminal record at all. The most common nonviolent convictions were for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. The data proves that the administration is not conducting a targeted search for the worst of the worst. It is conducting an indiscriminate sweep. This is a forensic analysis of power and control. The evidence shows that the shift toward arresting people without criminal records is not accidental. It is the result of direct political pressure to meet arbitrary quotas. Senior White House advisor Stephen Miller stated on Fox News that the goal is a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day. He said the president would keep pushing to get that number higher. The Wall Street Journal reported that agents are under pressure from these daily quotas to reach 1 million arrests in a year. When law enforcement is forced to meet a volume quota, they prioritize convenience over public safety. David Beer of the Cato Institute described these arrests as indiscriminate. He noted that the administration removed the prioritization policies that focused on violent criminals. They replaced those policies with a mandate to arrest whoever is most convenient to find. This is how a government uses its police power to satisfy a political metric rather than a security need. The control of information is also a tool of this administration. The Department of Homeland Security has refused to provide data that would substantiate its claims. Secretary Noem and other officials claim that people without U.S. records are actually terrorists or gangsters from their home countries. But they have provided zero data to back this up. Experts like Graham Blair of the Deportation Data Project have called these claims bluster. Colleen Putzel-Kavanaugh of the Migration Policy Institute has noted that the government is simply not giving the public access to the data that would allow for an independent assessment of their claims. This lack of transparency allows the administration to maintain a false narrative while avoiding accountability for the actual results of its policies. The strongest defense argument offered by the administration is that their data includes those with pending charges. Secretary Noem and Tom Homan reached their 70% figure by counting anyone with a pending criminal charge as a criminal. They argue that these individuals pose a threat to the community. We must dismantle this argument using the law. In the American legal system, a charge is not a conviction. Lauren Brooke Eisen of the Brennan Center for Justice reminds us that people are innocent until proven guilty. David Hausman, an assistant professor at the UC Berkeley School of Law, points out that someone with a pending charge is not called a criminal in our system. By labeling everyone with a charge as a criminal, the administration is discarding the fundamental legal principle of the presumption of innocence. They are using the existence of a charge, which may never lead to a conviction, as a pretext for deportation and as a way to inflate their statistics of dangerous arrests. The administration also attempts to defend its actions by labeling victims of federal shootings as terrorists. Following the shooting of Renee Good by an ICE officer on January 7th, the administration labeled her a professional agitator and a domestic terrorist. Following the shooting of Alex Preddy on January 24th, Secretary Noem labeled him a domestic terrorist within hours. She claimed he intended to kill law enforcement. We dismantled this with the forensic evidence of video. Multiple videos show Renee Good was driving away when the officer fired 3 shots into her windshield. Video analysis of the Alex Preddy shooting shows he was wrestled to the ground by multiple agents. While he was pinned down and incapacitated, officers fired 10 shots into him. Preddy was an intensive care unit nurse. He had a permit for the handgun he carried. The administration's defense is not based on facts. It is based on the immediate and baseless criminalization of those killed by the state to avoid scrutiny of the officer's actions. Let us provide a legal education in plain English. The Constitution of the United States provides a mechanism for holding federal officers accountable for their actions. This is the power of impeachment. Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution states that the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Secretary Kristi Noem is a civil officer of the United States. The term high crimes and misdemeanors does not only mean a violation of a criminal statute, it refers to political offenses. It refers to misdeeds committed by public officials against the state. It refers to an abuse of public trust. It refers to conduct that is incompatible with the nature of the office. The House of Representatives has the sole power to impeach. They act like a grand jury to determine if there is enough evidence to bring charges. If a majority of the House approves articles of impeachment, the official is impeached. The case then goes to the Senate for a trial. A conviction in the Senate requires a 2/3 majority. If convicted, the official is removed from office. The Senate can also vote to disqualify that person from ever holding federal office again. This is the constitutional process. It is a tool of accountability designed to protect the public from officials who abuse their power or lie to the people they serve. Based on the evidence, the professional judgment on Secretary Kristi Noem's fitness for office is clear. She has demonstrated a consistent pattern of prioritizing political narratives over factual accuracy and public safety. She has used her office to spread demonstrably false statistics about the arrests conducted by her department. She has publicly labeled American citizens as domestic terrorists before any formal investigation could be completed. She has done so even when video evidence contradicted her claims. This behavior undermines the integrity of the Department of Homeland Security and the public's trust in federal law enforcement. A high-ranking official who uses the power of the state to dehumanize victims of police violence and to deceive the public about the activities of their agency is failing in their basic duty to the Constitution. Secretary Noem's actions in Minneapolis illustrate this failure. She deployed 3,000 federal agents to a city where the immigrant population is only 2.2%. She claimed this was necessary to remove murderers and rapists. Yet the data shows that her agents were arresting peaceful immigrants and people with no criminal records. She defended the use of chemical agents against families with infants. She refused to place agents involved in fatal shootings on administrative leave, a standard procedure criticized by members of her own party. Senator John Curtis, a Republican, noted that officials who rush to judgment before all facts are known undermine public trust. This is not the conduct of a professional law enforcement administrator. It is the conduct of a political operative using federal power as a tool of theater and oppression. We must look to the expert authority stack to understand the weight of this evidence. These are not partisan critics. These are researchers and legal scholars who study this data for a living. Graham Blair is an associate professor of political science at UCLA and the co-director of the Deportation Data Project. He has stated that the administration's rhetoric about murderers and rapists does not tell the story of what they are actually doing. David Hausman is an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley School of Law. He has clarified that the administration's definition of a criminal is inconsistent with the American criminal justice system. Colleen Putzel-Kavanaugh is an associate policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute. She has documented the government's failure to provide substantiating data for its claims. Lauren Brooke Eisen is the Senior Director for Justice at the Brennan Center for Justice. She has highlighted the violation of the presumption of innocence in the administration's rhetoric. David Beer of the Cato Institute has documented that the administration has abandoned the prioritization of violent criminals in favor of indiscriminate arrests. Institutional accountability is the only remaining path for these failures. In the House of Representatives, Democratic lawmakers have already filed articles of impeachment against Secretary Noem. Representative Robin Kelly introduced these articles following the killing of Renee Good. The charges include obstruction of Congress, violation of the public trust, and self-dealing. The obstruction charge stems from Noem's reported withholding of appropriated funds and blocking lawmakers from entering DHS facilities. The violation of public trust charge involves the use of warrantless arrests and violence against U.S. citizens. The self-dealing charge alleges the inappropriate use of taxpayer dollars for a $200 million recruitment contract awarded to a firm run by the husband of a senior DHS official. By Tuesday afternoon, 162 House Democrats had co-sponsored these articles. The courts have also begun to play a role in attempting to restrain these actions. A federal judge in Minnesota issued an order on a Friday prohibiting the use of chemical agents by federal officers. This order followed video evidence of gas being used against families and children. Secretary Noem dismissed this order as ridiculous. This shows a disregard for judicial oversight that is consistent with her department's broader lack of transparency. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Rand Paul, chairman of the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, has called for an independent investigation into the killing of Alex Priddy. He has criticized Noem for her rush to judgment and has called for agency leaders from ICE and Border Patrol to testify before his committee. This indicates a bipartisan loss of confidence in the secretary's leadership and the accuracy of her department's reporting. We now move to the procedural consequences. There is no room for hope or hype in this analysis. We focus only on the mechanics of the law. The filing of articles of impeachment is a formal procedural step. It moves the allegations into the House Judiciary Committee for investigation. However, the House is currently controlled by Republicans, making the advancement of these articles unlikely in the short term. The Democratic Minority Leader, Hakeem Jeffries, has called for Noem to be fired and stated that if she is not, the party will move forward with impeachment. This sets up a procedural confrontation in the House. The funding of the Department of Homeland Security is the next procedural battleground. Democrats in the Senate have opposed the DHS spending bill in the wake of the Minneapolis shootings. They are demanding that the measure be stripped from the government funding package and renegotiated to include constraints on federal immigration enforcement. This has increased the statistical probability of a partial government shutdown. If the funding bill is not passed, the department may be forced to rely on existing funds from prior legislation, such as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. These are the levers of power being pulled. There is no guarantee of a specific outcome. There is only the ongoing conflict between an administration pushing for 3,000 arrests a day and a legislature beginning to use its power of the purse and its power of impeachment to respond. The record is established. The administration claimed they were arresting the worst of the worst. The data shows they were arresting thousands of people with no criminal records. The administration claimed 70% of detainees were violent criminals. The data shows only 5 to 7% had violent convictions. The administration claimed victims of federal shootings were terrorists. The video shows they were an ICU nurse and a woman driving away. The law defines these actions as potential high crimes and misdemeanors. The House has begun the process of impeachment. The Senate has begun the process of blocking funds. This is the state of accountability in the United States today. We will continue to follow the data and the law where they lead. The facts are these. Federal immigration enforcement has transitioned from a policy of prioritization to a policy of volume. This transition has led to the death of American citizens and the detention of thousands of non-criminals. The Secretary of Homeland Security has maintained a narrative that is directly contradicted by her own department's data. The institutional response has begun in the form of impeachment articles and funding challenges. These are the procedural realities. They do not offer a quick resolution. They offer only a documented path of accountability through the constitutional framework. We remain focused on the evidence. We remain focused on the law. And we remain focused on the facts that the administration continues to ignore. This is a prosecutorial news analysis. We have examined the claim. We have presented the forensic evidence. We have analyzed the power structure behind the lies. We have dismantled the administration's defenses using the law. We have provided a legal education on the standards of impeachment. We have delivered a professional judgment on the fitness of the secretary. We have cited the expert authorities, and we have outlined the institutional and procedural consequences. This is the method of accountability. This is the work of a free press and a constitutional republic. We will not look away from the data. We will not accept the lie as the final word. The record stands, the law remains, and the process of accountability continues. This is the state of the story as it exists today. No more, no less. Just the facts, just the evidence, just the law, and the consequences that must follow when they are violated. The total number of arrests continues to rise, but the safety of the public is not being served by the arrest of non-criminals. When the focus of law enforcement shifts from public safety to political quotas, the results are inevitable. You get more arrests, but you don't get more security. You get more conflict, but you don't get more order. And you get more deaths, but you don't get more justice. This is the reality of the 3,000 arrests a day mandate. This is the reality of the worst lie. The American people deserve a government that tells them the truth. They deserve a law enforcement agency that follows the law. And they deserve a Secretary of Homeland Security who understands that her first duty is to the Constitution and the truth. Until that happens, the crisis of accountability will continue. We will be here to document every step of that crisis, every lie, every piece of evidence, and every attempt to hold those in power responsible for their actions. This is the duty of the analyst. This is the requirement of the moment. And this is the standard we will maintain. The evidence is in. The case is clear. The rest is a matter of procedure and the will of the representatives of the people. We will watch, we will analyze, and we will report because the facts matter. And the truth is the only foundation for a functioning democracy. This concludes the analysis.